I'm blue, I would be, I would die. If I was green, I would die. I would be, I would die. I would be, I would die.
Hey guys, today is the last video in the series of how to get started on YouTube and other social media. There are 4 other videos in this series, which are right here. They are all already done, so if you need to go catch up on any, I think this order makes more sense. So go click them, check them out, write me out. But otherwise, we're gonna go right into today's topic, which is, I forgot. I would argue it is the most important video of this series just because there's a lot of information on camera lighting, editing audio, how to go from 0 to something subscribers, and even how to make money on YouTube, but there's not a lot of videos or information on the internet about what multi-channel networks are, also known as MCNs, and what YouTubers or aspiring YouTubers should be looking at when they're going over contracts for anything social media related. And if you don't know these things, you could really find yourself in a pickle, or a cucumber if it hasn't been marinated in vinegar yet. Hopping right into it. First thing I'm going to talk about is contracts. And these are contracts that are going to come up pertaining to pretty much everything I discussed in my last video about how to make money. Sometimes you will find contracts in social media situations that don't involve money but are still holding you to some kind of a trade. So these actually come up quite a bit, and they can start as early as you having 2,000 subs. It could start as late as something like 100,000 subs, but it's going to come up at some point probably for you if you're participating in any kind of outside extracurricular social media activities, after school special kind of things. So the first thing I want to talk about with contracts is the kinds of things you want to make sure are in most contracts that you're dealing with. I need to first start out by saying that I am obviously not a lawyer. I've never managed anybody, I'm not an agent, I'm not someone who would know a lot about entertainment law or law in general. So I'm going to be talking about everything pretty vaguely, and I would recommend that you do your own research further on anything that I am talking about just to make sure that you have a good understanding of it as well in a way that I probably am not able to explain it. But I do just want to give you some things to generally keep an eye out for, pay attention to, and learn more about. With that said, I want to start by talking about things you might just want to look for in a contract that could be red flags, or things that are definitely red flags that you want out of a contract. The first thing to look out for is all-inclusive or binding language. What I mean by that is a clause that says something like, we can use at any time any of your pictures ever made in the past or the future. It'll be phrased a lot more fancy legal-like, but you get the gist. Anything that doesn't specify an amount or leaves it open to a whole slew of things. You want contracts to be specific to the jobs that they are pertaining to. Do not give a company the rights to use anything you've ever made or are going to make without any limitation. These do come up in social media contracts. And in any of these cases, it's not to say that a company intends to screw you over. You might trust the company a lot as it is today, but the people that you trust now who work there might not be there 10 years from now, and you will have signed a contract legally that gives them free range to anything at any time. This kind of goes with the all-inclusive language thing, but you want to make sure that you're not looking at any time frames for your contract that are unspecified. You want to make sure that the contract has a term. Maybe you're looking to let a company use an image of yourself to advertise something of theirs. You want to make sure that the term is specified in the contract where it says you can use my image for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, for the next year, for the next month. Or if you want to allow them to be able to use it forever, you can say that and you can put that in the contract or make sure that it's there. But again, make sure that everything else is very specific. Exactly what nature can they use that picture in? Can it be reproduced 100 times? Can it be reproduced 1,000,000 times? Can it be reproduced on just this kind of format, like say in a poster? Or can it be reproduced in any capacity on a website, on a billboard, on product? Specificity is key. Moving on. You want to watch out for any contract that has an auto-renewal clause, and these come up frequently in social media, in my experience. What that means is that there will be something in the contract that basically says, this contract is for a year, Unless you forget to tell us in writing 90 days before the end of it that you're unhappy and you want out of it, in which case it's gonna renew again for another year. That's obviously not the best thing. A lot of people do forget when their contracts are auto-renewing, and then they will end up stuck again in something that they weren't totally happy with to begin with, or without renegotiating the terms a year later, even if you did want to stay with that company for whatever it is you're doing. So either don't have them or know that you're signing an auto-renew contract and pay attention to it. Some will notify you in that 90 to 60 day period if it's in the contract to notify you, but sometimes you're on your own to remember. So generally speaking, they're kind of sketch. This is not a red flag in itself, but it's something to pay attention to. Let's say I'm coming out with my own eyeshadow palette and I'm splitting the proceeds of the sales of that with the company that I'm teaming up with, collabing with to make it, and myself, obviously. Or let's say it's merchandise or anything that involves splitting profits or making profits. Heck, it applies to a lot of things potentially. You want to pay attention to the words gross versus net. You want to know if you are collecting the gross amount of something, which is like the point blank cost of something, or if you're talking about net, which is the resulting amount after the cost of goods and manufacturing and stuff like that are taken out of it. Because those are potentially very different numbers. Some companies will come to you and offer you like 80-20, 80% for you, 20% for them for something. And they might sell it to you that way as though like, wow, like I'm gonna get 80% of everything, every penny that comes in from this thing. Unless your contract says that you get 80% of net. So to elaborate more, let's say that something is sold for $100. You think you're gonna get $80 out of that. But if you're getting net, that would mean that if it's $100 to sell, but it costs $50 to make, you're going to get 80% of $50 and not of $100. You get me? Some maths for you? It's hard to talk about this without giving you literal, concrete, specific examples of where this might apply. I know, I'm sorry. And net is not a bad thing, but again, you just want to keep your eyes peeled and to know which one you're getting. That way there's no surprises later. And if it's not specified, you want to make sure it's specified. Okay, I know. I would say you don't want any clauses that want you to say a script where you can't put it in your own words, like an exact script, unless it's like a commercial, which kind of leaves social media and goes on to traditional advertising. No exact scripts, and nothing that stops you from being honest. Some companies will try to pull one by you that says you need to give positive feedback only, and that's actually, I believe, illegal because the FTC has guidelines that states that you need to be completely honest about your feelings on a product if you're promoting them in conjunction with some kind of monetary payment. So regardless of, I think, the legal implications of not being honest about a product, you would want to anyway ethically. Let's say you want to make a deal with a company that approached you and they said, we want you to use our product in your YouTube video. And let's also say that this company is on a really tight deadline to get this video out. So you don't have time to vet the product before you agree to sign a contract saying, I like this product enough to use it in a video. That does happen, and in that case, you want to make sure that there's a clause in your contract that states that the entire contract can be voided if you try the product once you get it, and you cannot vouch for it because you don't like it or you do have some kind of big problem with it. Otherwise, ideally, just vet the product first and then work with them if you like it. Companies should be providing FTC compliance guidance somewhere in the contract that tells you what those guidelines are. What I'm talking about is that you do need to specify if something is sponsored or an ad. If that kind of compliance guidance is not in your contract, something to look out for. You want to avoid any clauses that says that they can alter your image, pretty much at all, or if they must alter your image, or if it's a situation where it would make sense for them to alter your image. Let's say they're using your image for a banner or print ad or something like that, they might be adding text on top of it. If they are altering it for any reason, you want to make sure that you get prior approval for all of it. Because if it looks horrible, you're going to want to know that before it's out, and you're going to want to retain some control in that area. But in most cases, you would probably want a clause that doesn't allow them to alter any images, period. Now let me talk about some of the things that you want to make sure you do have in the contract, which in a lot of cases are just like the negatives of some of the things I listed. But in addition to that, one thing you would definitely want to see in your contract is something like 50% of the payment up front, especially if you're doing a lot of work. If you can't get that, it's okay, but either way, you want to also define when you're getting paid if it's after the fact. So even if it's 50% after the fact or 100% after the work is done, you want to make sure it says what the exact payment is and within how many days or whatever time frame it's due after the work has been completed. Typically, it's within 30 days of the project being done or the work being completed that you get paid. Another thing you want to make sure you have in a contract is a pay or play clause, which basically means that you still get paid for doing the work even if they decide not to follow up with whatever the thing is. So for example, you might be hired to do a video for a makeup company or some other kind of company. You might do all the work, shoot it, edit it, put it together, send it to them, and then they might decide that the campaign that they were going to use it for, they're no longer going to use it, or the campaign just dies off and they don't even need it. You would still get paid for that because you still did your part of the work. I have run into this myself before, and it's a crappy feeling, so make sure that clause is in there somewhere. And then some general contract tips. This should go without saying, but do not ever just sign anything without reading it fully. Even if it's a page long, even if it's 20 pages long, you want to make sure that you are reading every single word before you print your name on it and sign it, because once you do that, it doesn't matter what it says inside of it. That tells a court of law that you did read everything and you agreed to everything at the moment that you signed it. So don't be stupid. And read carefully. I found myself in a mistake with something very similar to this even recently, where I didn't read something carefully enough, and one word meant the difference between something I was okay with and something that I was not, and I had already signed. And then you can't do a damn thing about it, so don't do as I do as I say. Another general tip is to communicate in writing as much as possible, especially if you are working with a company for the first time and you're unsure about what it's like to work with them, if you can trust them, etc., etc. A lot of companies will try to talk to you on the phone about a lot of business deals that do involve money, and I think that's because a lot of people have a hard time standing their ground on the phone, or because they can go back on what they said verbally later. And some contracts will void everything that you've discussed, whether in writing or not, up until the moment of the contract, but in any case, it is always helpful to keep any discussions that you have about business in writing as much as possible, in case, God forbid, it ever comes up later in a court of law. And my last tip of advice is to ask for help where you can get it. Ideally, you would always have a lawyer look at every single contract you sign. But if not, there are other means like Googling as much as possible, an extra pair of eyes to read over something. Agents can do it for you, managers can do it for you, your dog can do it for you, although you might not get a lot out of the dog. Yeah, on to MCNs. So let me quickly explain to you what an MCN is, because we haven't really gone over exactly what it is in any of the previous videos. I've just touched on it very briefly. MCNs are what is it, an acronym? It's an acronym, right? MCN is an abbreviation. No, is it abbreviation? MCNs are short for multi-channel networks. And what they do is they pick a bunch of channels that are already existing on YouTube, and they put them under their umbrella of MCN friendship, and they represent you, and they help you make your channel better, and they help you get sponsored work, and they're just like your little army. They're a little army for you, or so they say. And in exchange for them being a little army for you, you give them some of your money that you make off YouTube or in your sponsored gigs. There are some beauty and lifestyle specific ones like Style Haul. There's more generalized ones like Awesomeness TV, Full Screen. There's so many. And what'll happen is, as you start to grow a little bit of an audience, you will start to get more and more emails from people representing multi-channel networks that are trying to recruit you. And their emails will say something generic, because they're emailed out to hundreds of people that day probably. They'll say something generic like,
"Hey, channel name here, we would love for you to join our platform because your videos are great. We watched so many of them. And we think you would really benefit from being part of our thing we got going on, where we're going to optimize your channel and we're going to get you a higher CPM, $10 CPM. You're going to grow so much, we're going to cross-promote you, and you're going to need us because we're better than all the other MCNs." Basically.
That's what they'll say. In so many words. Now, let me tell you my thoughts about these MCNs. I've mentioned in previous videos that I think that they could be an asset, at least in theory, to some things. But I do need to put this out there very clearly. so that no one misses it. For the most part, I don't think most people should ever sign with an MCN. There, I said it. And that is because I think that in the best case scenario, most of what they do or offer can be done through other means. And in worst case scenario, I think that they take total advantage of people. So let me discuss that a little bit. Disclaimer for this section, I have never signed with an MCN, so I do not have firsthand experience of what it's like to be under an MCN. I know that that's important and that's something to consider with everything I'm going to say. But my opinion about this is formed by my experience in reading the different contracts from several different MCNs, meeting with several different MCNs, talking to many friends that have been parts of MCNs, and other general advice I've gotten from industry people who work very closely with MCNs. I don't think that they offer you anything that you really can't do it all on your own. You can optimize your channel yourself. You can reach out to collab with other people yourself, because even if they say that they'll help you collab with people under their umbrella, it doesn't mean that they're going to say yes. An MCN doesn't force anyone to do anything. So it's still up to the discretion of that person you'd like to collab with. They're not going to make your CPM $10. They say they'll cross promote you, but a lot of them don't have a big enough pull with an audience of their own to get you growth directly from that. They say that they'll get you sponsored videos. You can absolutely do that on your own, and it will happen on your own just with having a big audience. And then you won't have to split your revenue with them, because not only do they take a cut of what they get you from sponsored deals, which makes absolute sense, but they also take a cut of your Adsense earnings, which is the money that you make from your YouTube videos. A lot of MCNs offer a 70-30 split for smaller channels, which means you keep 70% of your Adsense earnings and they keep 30%. And you have to remember that you're already splitting your AdSense with Google. Your earnings from YouTube itself are 55% of the actual ad revenue that you're taking in, and YouTube/Google takes a 45% cut of that. So if you're a small channel and an MCN approaches you and they say they'll give you a 70-30 split, you are making 70% of the 55% left after YouTube takes their cut. And you're already not making a lot to begin with. So those are some reasons. On top of all those reasons, it is my belief and my opinion that a lot of multi-channel networks prey specifically on smaller channels that are showing some promise of growth in the future, because they do take higher percentages of AdSense earnings from smaller channels. And from what I've observed and heard, they do not help out small channels hardly at all, if at all. I mean, I've seen some channels that have 1,000 subscribers that are signed with a certain MCN, and they've been at 1,000 subscribers for the last 2 years, and they're 12 years old. These are people that I think are straight up being taken advantage by, because they get an email from someone saying that they want to sign them, and they get really excited because that sounds really exciting and like they've made it on YouTube, and they don't realize that this company might take your earnings in exchange for doing very little for you and your channel. If you are a bigger channel, they will usually offer you a better split. They might offer you 80-20. They might offer you 90-10. I've seen offers of 100-0, but then you probably should expect that if you get to keep 100% of your AdSense, they might not be doing a lot of direct channel work. They might be focusing more on the sponsored things where they get a commission off of it. But it is possible to sign with MCNs that take 0% of your AdSense. But they're rare, and you have to have a pretty big audience for them to offer it. On top of everything I've already mentioned, I have heard absolute horror stories from some people that I know who have been with an MCN or are currently with an MCN, bad scenarios that they've found themselves in, that they are stuck in, that they can't get out of, totally unhappy. And the one person that I've talked to that actually had something good to say about their MCN also said that they didn't really do anything for them until they hit a certain subscriber number pretty much on their own without any help, and then they started paying attention to them. And I think that's really crappy. Again, this is not me surveying every single multi-channel network ever, and this is without having any direct experience, but I have not heard any good things. Pretty much ever. Another negative about multi-channel networks is that a lot of them claim to be all in-house productions where they are both working with brands and working with their clients or content creators to get the best deal. And in my way of thinking, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because you have a company that is both trying to get brands the best deals that they can when they are looking to reach out to content creators and sell them a package or a campaign. And that same company is also working with content creators to try to get them the best deal. So it seems like there's a big conflict of interest there, at least to me. is that sound? Is that my fridge? So they're working for opposite parties, and that seems like a major conflict of interest to me. But you make your own decisions. On top of that, I've seen several contracts from MCNs that were offering me a partnership, and most of them are completely one-sided. They will say, you, as in me, the content creator, you are responsible for doing all of these things that we're gonna hold you to legally, but us, we're not gonna hold ourselves to anything legally. All those things we promised in that initial email to you, we're gonna optimize your channel, we're gonna make sure you get sponsored brand deals, we're gonna make sure we cross-promote you, we're gonna make sure that you grow and your CPM hits this and da-da-da. None of those things show up in the contracts sometimes. How interesting. I get huge about this stuff. So in theory, they could do nothing for you for the entire term of the contract, take 30% of your AdSense, or 80, or 20, whatever the deal is. They could take that away from you, do nothing for you in that time, and they would be legally entitled to do so because you will have signed a contract that didn't bind them to do anything, which doesn't mean that they won't, but if they didn't, they could easily get away with it. Why on earth would you sign that? Why would you sign that? Don't. So that's how I feel. My suggestion, instead of signing with an MCN, if you are anything under, people are gonna disagree with me on this, but I would say if you are under 500K, heck, if you are under $1 million, I don't think you should even think about signing with an MCN for the most part. Maybe not in every case, maybe not with every MCN, but I would strongly caution against it for the most part. And I would instead recommend that when a part of YouTube gets too overwhelming for you, let's say you can't keep up with optimizing your channel, let's say you're bad at handling or getting sponsored deals, let's say you're bad with managing the money that you have to deal with because of all of the social media promotional or AdSense type stuff, I would then recommend getting someone who specializes in something to help you with those areas that you become overwhelmed in or that you don't know enough about when you've got the money to do so and split some of your revenue. For example, get a manager or an agent. An agent can actually reach out to other brands for you and hopefully curate some kind of partnership, whereas a manager can't do that, but they can handle anything that comes into you already. When people are reaching out to you, they can work through the contracts, negotiate on behalf of you. They can basically keep your social media job life in order. If it was just the money thing, you could hire an accountant to deal with the money side of your YouTube business. And you can find managers that do not take a cut of your AdSense whatsoever. They take a commission off of the deals that they get you. And then in that case, it is so worth that split. But you probably won't need anything like that until your audience gets to something sizable, because that's when the brand deals start coming in a lot quicker and it's harder to juggle them all and the contracts get more serious. As I've said, I have not signed with an MCN, but I do have a manager/agent who handles a lot of the more overwhelming parts of this whole job for me now and lets me focus on the creative parts of the job. And they are someone who is working for me and not for the brands that are approaching me. Though we throw in some positives because everything has pros and cons. Now, I think there is a case in which MCNs are not necessarily such a bad thing. I just think that it's only a small portion of channels compared to the actual amount of channels that they're reaching out to or that they represent. I think that MCNs might be useful in the case of someone who is already a big established channel. When I say big, in this case, I mean anything over 1 million, potentially less, maybe more, it depends. I think that MCNs might be helpful in that case because, one, they're not going to be taking a large percentage of AdSense earnings. They're not going to give a big channel a 70-30 split. They're probably going to give them a 90-10 or a 95-5 or a 100-0. So it might be worth it to split your AdSense then. From what I've heard from everybody, they work a lot harder for the big channels, which makes sense because the big channels are who makes them a lot of money and helps smaller channels sign to their MCN because they'll say, oh, well, this really big YouTuber that I really like is signed with them, so it must be a good one. So big channels benefit MCNs a lot, which would mean that they probably do work harder for them. And then the other perk of an MCN at that point is probably just that instead of just having a manager or one agent or one person working for you, there's an entire team that works for you. There's an entire team of people that would either be optimizing your channel or reaching out to brands for you to get sponsored deals or whatever it may be. I do think that even though you can optimize your channel on your own, that MCNs are probably better at doing it because they have people that spend time on that and that alone and that are constantly researching what the new YouTube algorithm is that changes what comes up in search results. So that may then be worth it. But I think there's still that conflict of interest there where they're working for the brands and you simultaneously. So, still don't know if I'm sold on the idea, even if you are already a big established channel, but it is possible that they could be helpful in that regard in a way that just a solo manager or agent or yourself could not be. I'll give them that. But for most people watching this video, beware. If you must sign with them, here's some advice. Never, ever, ever sign for less than 90%, 90-10 of your AdSense. Never, ever. They don't usually offer to smaller channels, which in their mind, I think generally is about 100K or less. But if they can't give you that, you don't need them. You don't need them. Even if they can offer you 90-10, again, still all those other things, they don't go away. If you must sign with them, make sure it's not an auto-renewing contract. They often are. Make sure that it's not for more than 1 year. 1 year. No signing 3-year bullshit. 1 year is plenty at a time. Not even 2. Not even 2. If you can, try to get an MCN that offers you a trial run for the first 2, 3, 4 months. You get to try it out with no holds, where you can leave if you decide you don't like it and you don't have to sign anything, but they'll still do the things for you. Some MCNs offer that now, and that is awesome, but just keep in mind that how hard they work for you in that trial period, it might be to get you to sign, and they might not deliver once you sign. And to look out for all the things I've already mentioned earlier in this video about what to watch out for in contracts in general, because they absolutely apply to MCN contracts, which are usually hella crazy. Make sure that both sides are held accountable to do the things that they are promising to do. You need to promise that you're gonna upload and yada yada yada, and they need to promise that they are going to at least try to get you sponsored deals, and they're going to try to make your channel grow, and they're going to optimize your channel, and they're going to help you deal with copyright issues and all the things they promise you. They should be in the contract that they're at least going to do those things to the best of their ability. Don't let them get away with it. But gosh, honestly, just don't sign. But if you have to, do those things. Be careful when you're picking managers and agents too. My first manager did very, 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 very little for me in a very long amount of time. So find someone who is experienced in the stuff that your channel actually pertains to, whether that's beauty, lifestyle, comedy, whatever. And make sure that they work hard. Same with signing contracts with a manager or agent. All this stuff. It applies everywhere. My manager I didn't get until after I reached 1 million subscribers, but I probably could have used one beforehand. It's going to vary for everyone depending on when you get overwhelmed with stuff. And for me, I was super overwhelmed with having to deal with legal BS, like all this stuff. So I just avoided it hardcore for the longest time. That way I didn't get myself into any more trouble than I already had. The legal stuff is both scary and necessary in a lot of ways for a healthy YouTube life. Okay, that's everything I have to say, I think. Every time I edit one of these videos, I find about 10 more things I should have said, and then I add them in text in the video later, which you've probably already seen in this one, so that's what's happening there. I do, of course, have to mention one more time that this is every other video in the series, which is now complete. They are all clickable. Click them all. Learn all the things. I hope that this helps anyone, someone, everyone, even one person. I am not an expert, but I am here to help always with whatever I know, and sometimes that's not going to be makeup, like it is in this case. So thank you very much for watching this series, even if you've got no interest in being on social media, and if you do, please let me know what and how this helped you in any way, because this makes me happy. Okay, back to makeup. Signing off. Ah!